us coming together as family. So without any further ado, I'm going to move straight ahead, and I'm going to pass it on to my brother, Rabbi Chief Binyamin. How are you, Rabbi?
I'm doing good, giving praise and honor to the Most High, thanking Him for all of our lives. Hopefully you're doing well, along with everybody that is watching this day. We are grateful for all that He does for us and praying that He would bless us continually with knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. We have this opportunity to open up His Word as we do so each week, opening up the Holy Scriptures. And we just pray that He would continue to guide us and protect us and grant us knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, and show us the way that we should be walking before Him. And again, as we attempt to do this Bible study every Sunday morning, 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern Time, we invite everybody to join in, subscribe to the page, also invite your family and your friends. We utilize the Bible, and anybody that utilizes the Bible as the foundation of their belief, this Bible study is for you. So again, we thank the Most High for this opportunity to discuss His Word this day. And feel free to join in. We'll be discussing two topics today. We've been going through the past month or so, the book of Isaiah, but normally whenever we have any type of event that could be connected scripturally or biblically, we do discuss it, discuss the ins and the outs of it, whether it's actually scripturally related or not. These are things that we do when we have certain topics. We also invite people to share topics of discussion. If there's any questions or topics that people would like us to discuss in the future, feel free to do so. Put it in the chat, or email us info@DCB.org, or any means that you can use to contact us, and we'll do what we can to get to those topics in a timely manner. But again, currently we're going through the book of Isaiah, the latter part of the book of Isaiah. So most likely next week we'll get back to that, unless there's another topic that is pressing, and we'll discuss that. But today we're going to be discussing, again, we're going to have two topics. So we're going to be discussing Christmas and Hanukkah. Christmas occurs December 25th every year, and Hanukkah occurs, according to the Hebrew calendar, on the 25th day of the 9th month. Both will be taking place this week. There's been a lot of talk that both were actually on the same day, but technically they're not on the same day this year. There have been times, actually a time a few years ago where they both actually occurred on the same day, but technically this year they are not on the same day. Christmas, of course, again, as we mentioned, December 25th, and Hanukkah will be beginning on the evening of December 25th this year, which actually leads it into December 26th. So they actually technically a day apart. I'm just looking at it from that perspective. So again, we're gonna discuss the two topics this week. We're just getting everything set up in the meantime, and hopefully, again, we'd be able to cover these two topics. And normally what we do each week is have 20 minutes to 30 minutes of the discussion of the topic for the week, and then open up the rest of the hour for questions and comments. Being that we have two subjects that we'll be discussing this week, it'll most likely be more than the 30 minutes of the discussion of the topic for the week. And then we'll still have some time for questions, but we'll try to go through this as quickly as possible, covering both topics. So the first one that we're actually going to go into first will be Xmas, or actually Christmas. That's what we'll be discussing first. So when it comes to Christmas, so we're going to discuss the origins of Christmas, its relation to the Bible, or its non-relation to the Bible. So that's what we're going to be discussing today, and some of the traditions and some of the rites that go along with Christmas and discuss where they come from. So overall, we're discussing the origins of Christmas and also discussing briefly how it developed throughout the years. And so Christmas, the name itself is basically Old English. It's Christ and Mass together. That's how the term has developed to where we discuss it, or the way we mention it in the English that we're speaking today, basically as Christmas. And Mass, coming from an older term, is basically a service, so to speak, religious service. So again, the two terms together, Christ, of course, the Christ of the New Testament, and the Mass, which is a service. So Christmas is actually basically saying it's a service for Christ. And then there's significance on two sides. So there's a religious significance, and then there's the secular significance. So on the religious side, Christmas is a celebration. There'll be church services on that day. There are also religious traditions that go along with it. But one of the things to know that there's no biblical reference to Christmas. So, because you don't read in the New Testament that Christ was born on December 25th. So it doesn't have a direct biblical reference, even though Christmas has a religious significance to Christians. Then on the secular side, because there are people that are not Christians but still observe Christmas, because again, and as we have the discussion, we'll talk about it a little bit more. But those even though that are not Christians, still celebrate Christmas to an extent because of the secular significance. When you look at what's happening in the world, and during the season, you hear the music in the stores, you hear the music on the radio. It's just the popularity of it, during this time. Basically, a lot of the world is keeping it, even though, again, a lot of a majority of the world may not be Christians. So along with it, the secular side of things, there's the gift giving. During this time, you may see, throughout the world, people are decorating their homes inside and out. They're definitely with lights outside and the Christmas tree, and, people dealing with Santa Claus as well, against Santa Claus. And we'll briefly discuss that as we go along. Santa Claus is directly connected to Christmas, because again, you'll see a lot of the Christmas, or hear a lot of the Christmas carols, or see a lot of the Christmas specials, and they deal with Santa Claus. A lot of the decorations themselves deal with Santa Claus even during this time. And also the significance on the secular side is dealing with the winter solstice, which occurred yesterday, December 21st is generally when the winter solstice occurs, and that's the shortest day of the year. But there are celebrations that predate Christmas in regards to the winter solstice, and we'll briefly discuss those things as we go along. So the winter solstice, as we just mentioned, it's an event, is basically marking the shortest day of the year, and also, as a consequence, the longest night of the year. And as we see, it marks the point where the sun appears at its lowest point in the sky at noon. And again, it's usually during December 21st. And there are various cultures, religions worldwide that celebrate the winter solstice. And again, a lot of these festivals, these rituals, and these traditions actually predate Christmas. And we'll see as we go along how some of these traditions, some of these rituals, and some of these festivals that deal with the winter solstice have seeped into the Christmas celebrations. So one of the celebrations is Saturnalia. This predates Christmas, and this was an ancient festival that deals with the winter solstice, and also dealing with this time of the year that the Romans would celebrate. And it deals primarily with the Roman god of time and agriculture. In ancient time, it was times in ancient Rome, so to say it that way. It was a time of merriment and revelry, a lot of celebrations, also people visiting temples, of course, to the god Saturn, which the Romans worshiped during that time, making offerings to that god, and there was various rituals that went along with it. And then also there was gift giving, there was feasting, and also there was lights. So it was, one of the original festivals of lights. So there's a lot of festivals of lights that occur, during this time of the year. And the Yule, people have heard of Yuletide, the Yule log, and things like that. The Yule is of Germanic and Nordic traditions. There was the burning of the Yule log, which was basically central to the tradition. It symbolizes the return of the sun's warmth and light. Again, we're speaking about winter solstice celebrations. And there was also gift giving, exchanging of gifts during the Yule tide season. There was also, this is where we get the evergreen plants and the holly and the ivy and all of those symbols that people place in and around their homes. So again, this comes from Germanic and Nordic culture in their celebration of the Yule season. And again, there were elaborate feasts, which was basically celebrating the return of the sun and people looking forward to, good fortune in the year to come. Also in China, Dongji, which emphasizes the balance of the yin and the yang, again, with the winter solstice dealing with the shortest daylight period and the longest nighttime. And also, again, in dealing with that balance, and now there's going to be the daylight is going to get longer and the nighttime will get shorter. And and that's in most of the world. It's not going to be exact. You're not going to get half and half all throughout the world, even near the equator. But you're going to have, even all throughout the world, just a gradual more daytime as the days go along. And same type of celebrations. There were families that were gathering together in some sort of reunion dinner. And basically this festival symbolized unity and the importance of family ties. And again, it celebrates the return of longer days and the increase of positive energy. And it reflects the harmony between nature and human life. So these are some of the things that went along with this Dongji celebration of China in regards to the winter solstice. So now also another celebration of Yalda night, which is amongst the ancient Persian and which is current day Iran. So Yalda night is of Iranian, or actually Persian origin, celebrated in Iran. And in ancient Persia, the god that they worshipped was Mithra, which is a sun god. So in the celebration of the winter solstice in regards to the god Mithra in Persia is also the celebration of the return of the gradual return of daylight and the lessening of the nighttime. It celebrates the victory of light over darkness, because again, now you have that transfer. The days are getting longer, the daylight period is getting longer, and then the nighttime period is getting shorter. So you have that just shift of balance, which is happening during this time that they were celebrating. And homes were adorned with candles and decorations. So you see so far during these winter solstice celebrations that a lot of the themes are pretty much the same. Decorations with lights, of course, in ancient time it would be candles, but you still had decorations, in and outside homes, in and outside temples, with lights and other things. People would gather together for dinners and have festivals. People would go to their temples and worship. And, particular for Yalda night, there was a consumption of these symbolic foods such as pomegranates and watermelons, which represented fertility, which represented also the change in balance, and also represented joy and happiness in the year to come. And that's what these winter solstice celebrations were signifying. So now in dealing with Christmas and Christianity, Christmas itself deals with the incarnation of Christ, deals with the fulfillment of prophecy, according, how the New Testament would dictate. It deals with the nativity story, which speaks about Christ being born in the manger, and the Gospels give their details on Christ and his birth, and then emphasizes love and salvation, which is a theme that is central to the New Testament, and the Advent preparation, which is another theme of the New Testament overall. So this is where Christmas and Christianity come together. And then December 25th, particularly, is not recorded in the Bible. As we mentioned earlier, the date of December 25th being the birth of Christ is not something that you would read in the New Testament. So what's been known historically is that Christmas was, or the date of Christmas was to signify the return of the sun, or the return of the sunlight, or the longer days. And that's why Christmas actually has a connection with the winter solstice celebrations. So again, there's nothing directly connected in the New Testament that speaks about Christmas and the celebration that go along with it. But the things that we see in the previous slides talking about those winter solstice celebrations shows the connection between Christmas and the winter solstice celebrations. So many cultures, ancient cultures, celebrated festivals around the winter solstice, as we already spoke about. And by aligning Christmas with these existing festivities, early Christians aimed to provide a Christian alternative while incorporating familiar traditions. So while, again, there is no New Testament tradition that speaks about the observance of Christmas, when Christians were started to celebrate Christmas, the winter solstice celebrations were incorporated as a means of getting people familiar with Christmas. And by adopting the previous, or the pagan rituals that went along with it. And the winter solstice symbolized the triumph of light over darkness, and earlier Christians saw the birth of Christ as a metaphorical light of the world. And again, this is how that connection came about. Then we have, the Puritan opposition. And Christmas was not always celebrated in the United States. Of course, it was not always celebrated throughout the world, but as we are speaking from the perspective of the United States, at this time, the Puritans and the Pilgrims, we know that these were the earlier Christians that migrated to the United States. Again, that's a whole different subject in terms of the Pilgrims, the Puritans, and everybody that migrated from Europe to the United States. But the Puritans were deep, deep Christians, but they opposed the observance of Christmas. So during the 17th century, particularly in England, and later in the American colonies, Puritans expressed strong opposition to the celebration of Christmas. Believe many Christmas customs were remnants of pre-Christian and Catholic practices that had no biblical basis. And this is one of the things that the Puritans believed. And again, as we've discussed previously, this is the reason why they were opposed to Christmas, because of the celebrations of it were basically pagan in origin. And in 1647, during the rule of Oliver Cromwell, Christmas was officially banned in England as parts of efforts to purify religious practices. So again, as Christianity was flourishing throughout Europe and primarily England, they wanted to have a pure form of Christianity. And that's why Christmas itself was officially banned. And again, as we continue to discuss, Christmas was not celebrated in the United States as well. And with the restoration of the English monarchy in 1660, the ban on Christmas was lifted, and the holiday gradually regained popularity. So the popularity that today of Christmas would not have been seen the same way if we were living, just 300, 400 years, prior to now. And in the American colonies, the Puritan influence waned over time, allowing for the resurgence of Christmas celebrations. So again, the Puritans had a heavy influence in what was happening in the early American colonies. So that's why Christmas was not observed in the United States initially. But as the Puritans, started to get, or their beliefs started to get, the Puritan beliefs, their systems, everything started to wane over a period of time. The Christmas celebrations started to rise. And one of the biggest things that helped the flourishing of the Christmas celebrations is the Victorian era. Queen Victoria, of course, this is in England. She married Prince Albert of, the German, and he brought the Christmas traditions to England with him. And this is where the Christmas tree became popular, and putting it within homes during the Victorian era, as in England, this started to happen again. We can see the connection of Christmas to the Yule season, as we mentioned earlier, because the Yuletide season is of Germanic origin. So with Prince Albert, of course, him being of Germanic origin, marrying Queen Victoria, he's bringing these German traditions with him into England. So again, this is where you have what we know as the evergreen tree becoming the Christmas tree. Once it comes into the homes and decorated, that becomes a focal point of the celebrations. The book, well, actually, A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens also had an impact on the Victorian view of Christmas, because this is where we get the scene of the Christmas tree in the house, the decorations on the tree, the decorations all throughout the house and outside of the house. This is A Christmas Carol basically gave that imagery of what Christmas should look like, and this is where people get the view of Christmas of today. And again, during that era, as Christmas started to build up in popularity, there were feastings and there were gatherings. And also this is where the advent of Christmas cards and gift giving also started to flourish, during this era in England. And again, this of course filtered over to the United States. And Santa Claus is also an image or a scene that's popular amongst during the Christmas time. And basically what happened is the Dutch settlers that came over from Europe into the United States, they brought the Santa Claus, as they would pronounce it, traditions to America. And Thomas Nast was instrumental in shaping the modern Santa in terms of the look, giving the look, because the original Santa Claus didn't actually have a look that people know of today with the red suit, the big beard and everything like that. So Thomas Nast, he had a book that he wrote and gave the description. No, actually, not just the book, but also he actually drew a description of what Santa Claus looks like. And then in the United States itself, during the Christmas time, after later on in history, Coca-Cola started to depict Santa Claus, and it still happens today during this season. You'll see that Coca-Cola would have images of Santa Claus on their product, and that started to help the proliferation of the image of Santa Claus. Santa Claus itself, the history of Santa Claus, is something that's actually even deeper than what we're talking about now. But again, we're just doing a brief overview of Christmas and some of the ideals. But again, it's showing some of the pagan and some of the non-religious customs and traditions that come along with Christmas and help to shape Christmas to be what it is today. So basically today is just a matter of us focusing on what is written in the Bible. So the Bible itself, which we know is commissioned by Jehovah God, there are holy days, there are holy seasons, there are appointed times that are listed in Leviticus chapter 23 and also in Deuteronomy chapter 16. All of these both are in the first 5 books of the Bible, which is also known as the Law of Moses, the law that Jehovah God gave to Moses as he was delivering his word to the children of Israel. So within that, we see the Sabbath, we see Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Festival of Unleavened Bread, the Festival of Weeks, the Day of the Hornblast, the Day of Atonement, the Festival of Booths or Tabernacles, and the 8th day of Solemn Assembly. And these are subjects that we spoke about. Well, mostly during the 7th month, the last 4 that are on that list are something that we spoke about in the last few months as we were acknowledging the 7th month in the Hebrew calendar. And then, of course, when these times come around, we spoke about the Sabbath not too long ago as well. And in a few months from now, we'll be speaking about Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And then, shortly after, a couple of months after that, we'll be speaking about the Festival of Weeks. And these are occurrences within the Bible. And the Bible also mentions Purim, also known as the Feast of Esther, which was not commissioned by Jehovah God, but is a festival or a feast of celebration based on deliverance for the children of Israel during Persian rule. And also extra biblical or something that's not in the Bible that is, and again, this is going to be a subject that we'll be discussing just now, which is Hanukkah, or pronounced as Hanukkah in Hebrew, which means dedication. So these, as we getting back to the Bible, and again, this is a Bible study, our goal is to focus on the things that are actually mentioned in the Bible, or something that is connected to the Old Testament that Jehovah God's word is spoken in. And again, Purim and Hanukkah are not holy seasons. They're not appointed by God, but they are periods of celebration and salvation for the children of Israel. And again, we spoke about Purim before, and we're going to speak about Hanukkah just now. So that brings us to the end of our discussion on Christmas, as we were discussing the origins of it. And again, we're going to be discussing Hanukkah just now, and we're going to open it up to questions and comments for both when we get to the end of discussing both of them. So again, we just wanted to do a brief overview on Christmas, and now, just in the interest of time, we're going to do a brief overview of Hanukkah as well, and discussing its connection to the Bible or its non-connection with the Bible. So again, any questions that people have, just feel free to hold it until the end, and then we'll be able to discuss both of them. Again, being that both observances will be happening this week, and actually, as we mentioned, both of them are not in the Bible. We were discussing the traditions that go along with Christmas, and again, we see that it's actually something that's, all along with not being biblical, is something that has pagan origins overall. And that's one of the reasons why it wasn't celebrated even amongst Christians. And it's something that developed over a period of time. So again, next we're going to be discussing Hanukkah. And again, this is going to be, try to do this brief as well. So we're discussing Hanukkah and the Maccabees, and this is a connection between the Maccabean revolt and the Hanukkah celebration that came along with it. So Hanukkah deals with, basically, it means dedication. So it's dealing with the rededication, so to speak, of the temple that King Solomon built in Jerusalem during the period of time where the children of Israel living in the territory of Judah, or as we'll be discussing, the Judean land, they were ruled by the Greeks at this period of time, or the Seleucid Greeks, which was one of the offshoots of the kingdom of Alexander. So Maccabees, we're going to be discussing first Maccabees, the book of First Maccabees. It gives you the historical account of the Maccabean revolt, and that occurred somewhere around 167 to 160 BCE. And this time frame, with this 7-year time frame, is something that's very important. We just discussed it during our last Bible study. We'll cover it a little bit this week. But that 7-year period of the Maccabean revolt is something that is, or the Maccabean revolt against Antiochus the fourth, is something that is very important. So the book, it chronicles the struggles of the Israelites under Seleucid rule. It speaks about the Israelite resistance against the Seleucid Empire and Antiochus the fourth Epiphanes in particular. And the themes that we read about in the book of First Maccabees is dealing with resistance, having strong faith, the fight for freedom, the fight for freedom to worship Jehovah God. And that's what the things that the Israelites were doing during this time. And it does cover the events that lead up to the establishment of the festival of Hanukkah, as we will be discussing shortly. And basically it celebrates the preservation of the Israelite spiritual and cultural identity, because as we will be discussing shortly, Antiochus IV, who is the Greek ruler of the Seleucid kingdom during this period of time, he attempted to Hellenize everybody under his reign. So in terms of the book itself, the book itself doesn't speak about who wrote it, and historically, people don't know exactly who the author or the authors of the book are. And it's likely written, as some history dictates, between 100 and 63 BCE. So you're talking somewhere between 60 years to 100 years to almost 100 years after the events that are written within it. But the book of First Maccabees, we're only discussing the first 6 chapters today. We're focusing actually on the first 4, but we're going to delve into the 5th and 6th a little bit because we're going to show the connection as we go along. But there are a lot of events that occur after those chapters, because the book of First Maccabees doesn't just stop at 6 and doesn't just stop when Antiochus IV dies, as is detailed in chapter 6, but it speaks about the battles, it speaks about the wars that the Maccabees had with the Seleucid kingdom, even after the death of Antiochus IV and leading up to the Roman influence that started to come into Judea as the Romans started to come in and to take over anything that the Greeks were in control of in that region. It was originally written in Hebrew, but there's no existing Hebrew text or original Hebrew text of the book of First Maccabees. But what existed was the Greek, which we have the translation in English throughout the process of time from that Greek into the English. But history dictates that it was originally written in Hebrew and then translated into Greek, and that was the formation. It's not included in the Hebrew calendar of the Holy Scriptures. So if you have a Holy Scriptures book, also known as the Old Testament, if you have a Tanakh, which is basically the Torah, the prophets, and the writings, which is basically encompasses the books that are, again, in the Holy Scriptures of the Old Testament, the book of First Maccabees is not included amongst that. But amongst the Catholic and Eastern Orthodox Christian canons of the Bible, you will see the book of First Maccabees there. And outside of that, it's in a book called the Apocrypha, which contains not just First Maccabees, but Second Maccabees and other books, the collection of books of Esdras and Ecclesiasticus, which is Ben Sirach, and various other books that are in the Apocrypha. So if you don't have a Catholic canon of the Bible, you would be able to get the First Maccabees in the Apocrypha. So now in dealing with chapter 1 of First Maccabees, it deals with Antiochus IV and how he persecuted the children of Israel via Hellenization. And Hellenization is the process of basically making people Greek and forcing people to follow Greek culture. So that's what he sought to do, and not just in Judea, because again, the book just focuses on the children of Israel living within that territory. But this is something that Antiochus IV was doing all throughout his reign in all of the regions that he was in control of. So he prohibited Israelite or Torah practices, and he desecrated the temple. And again, this is the details that are written within chapter 1 of First Maccabees. So he placed, the methods he did so was placing a pagan altar in the temple. Again, this is the temple of the house that King Solomon built. He banned circumcision and Sabbath observance, along with various other Torah practices. You also read where he would burn Torah scrolls, and if anybody would be found with a Torah scroll, they would be punished by death. So the Hellenization that was being instituted was basically forced. So people were forced to assimilate, or they would have to face death. These were the things that were happening during this time. And some of the children of Israel, when you read within this chapter, were willingly being Hellenized. When the gymnasium was built near the temple of God in Jerusalem, you had the children of Israel that, some of them that were willingly going there. You had those that would not circumcise their children. You had those that were circumcised, that figured out a process to uncircumcise themselves in order to assimilate themselves with the Syrian Greeks, as we would call them today, but again, the Seleucid Greeks under the reign of Antiochus IV during this time. Then also in that chapter, and this is something we'll speak about later on as well, but this is the topic of the abomination of desolation, where it mentions in First Maccabees chapter 1, verses 53 and 54. Now, in the 15th day of the month Kislev, in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar and built idol altars throughout the cities of Judea on every side, and burnt incense at the doors of their houses and in the streets. And when they had rent in pieces the books of the law which they found, they burnt them with fire. So this abomination of desolation, historically is an image of the Greek god Zeus, along with the altar that was placed in the temple site. So this abomination of desolation, this is a term that's repeated within the book of First Maccabees. And as we're having our discussion, it's something that is repeated in the book of Daniel. So last time we had a Bible study, we showed the connection between the book of Maccabees and the book of Daniel. And again, this is something that, just it's a brief discussion again about that abomination of desolation that is mentioned in the book of First Maccabees, and also is mentioned in various places in the book of Daniel, as is mentioned in Daniel chapter 8, verses 13 and 14, where it said, Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said unto the certain one who spoke, How long shall the vision concerning the continual burnt offering and the transgression that causes appalment to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot? And he said unto me, unto 2,300 evenings and mornings. Antiochus IV, along with setting up idol altars within the temple, he set up idol altars throughout Jerusalem and throughout the territory of Judea, as we read previously. And he stopped the daily burnt offerings that were being done by the Israelite high priest to Jehovah God. And the daily burnt offerings is something that we read about in the Holy Scriptures. That was something that was supposed to be done in the evening, in the morning, and at dusk. There are two that went up to Jehovah God each day. So Antiochus IV, he stopped that. So when you read in the book of Daniel, it's about somebody that's changing times and stopping the burnt offerings. This is what was being done during his reign. And in various translations of the book of Daniel, where we're having a discussion about the abomination of desolation, it's called the transgression that causes appalment. So you'll see desolation in some translations, you see appalment in other translations. You'll see abomination in some, you see transgression in other translations. So this transgression that causes appalment is the same as the abomination of desolation. And it depends on the translation in the English that you're reading. And again, we see the connection here. And also in the book of Daniel, chapter 9, verse 27, where he says, And he shall make a firm covenant with many for 1 week, and for half of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and the offering to cease. And upon the wing of detestable things shall be that which causes appalment, and that until the extermination wholly determined be poured out upon that which causes appalment. And that's in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. And it's highlighted here 1 week and half of the week. When we go along, we'll see the connection of that as well. So we see this period of a week or 7 years, or as we read in the previous verse, it's basically 6 and some change years, as will also be in the next verse that we're discussing in Daniel chapter 12, verses 11 and 12. And it says, And from the time that the continual burnt offerings shall be taken away, and the detestable thing that causes appalment set up, there shall be a 2,290 days, which is approximately 6.3 years. And it says, Happy is he that waits and comes to the 1,330 days, which is approximately 3.6. Sorry, I should have said previously, approximately 6.3 years. And that is 1,330 days is approximately 3 and 6 years. So when it says, Happy is he that waits and comes to that 3.6 years, is from the time that the abomination of desolation was set up, and that period of 3.6 years, or about 3.5 years, or the half a week, which is as is related in the book of Daniel chapter 9, that abomination of desolation was set up 3.5 years later on. That's when the temple was rededicated, as we know it to be, for the Hanukkah celebration. So now, as we go into chapter 2 of the book of Maccabees, we read about Mattathiah, who's a priest who refuses to worship pagan gods. As again, this book is detailing how Antiochus IV was attempting to Hellenize the children of Israel that were living in Judea, as he did so all throughout his reign. But again, focusing on the children of Israel during that time. Mattathiah, a priest of a city, living in a city called Modin, that he refuses to worship pagan gods. As the Seleucid army was entering into his city, as they were doing in various cities throughout Judea, and forcing people to sacrifice to pagan gods. So when it reached to Modin, he stood up. He refused to, because he was an elder and he was respected in that town. The Seleucid army attempted to force him to worship the pagan gods in order to influence the other Israelites to do the same. So his act of defiance basically is what started off the Maccabean revolt. So what he did was kill an Israelite that was trying to comply with the pagan worship, because when he wouldn't do it, somebody else stood up and said that they wouldn't worship the pagan gods. He was doing so out of fear and to save his life and thinking that he would save the lives of everybody else. But Mattathiah stood up and killed that Israelite man that was trying to worship the pagan god. And then he made Mattathiah himself said, "Let everyone who is zealous for the Lord follow me." And this, this cry, this call was to galvanize all of the children of Israel within that territory. And later on, this spread throughout the territory. And he led his sons and supporters into basically a guerrilla warfare against the Seleucid forces. Because, of course, they knew the terrain more than the Seleucid army that was coming in. So they were able to institute guerrilla warfare against the impending army and basically, push them away, town by town, village by village. And in Maccabees chapter 2, verse 20 and 21, it says, Mattathiah answered and spoke with a loud voice. Though all the nations that are under the king's dominion obey him, yet will I and my sons and my brethren walk in the covenant of our fathers. So when the army was trying to force him to worship pagan gods, this is what he was saying in response to that he was going to follow the covenant of his fathers, which is basically the covenant of the Torah, which is the covenant between Jehovah God and the children of Israel, and he was willing to stand up for that. So in chapter 3, his son Judah is placed in charge of the army. Mattathiah dies previously to that, of course. After a few wars or a few battles throughout the territory, he dies, and he gives the army over to his son Judah, also known as Judah Maccabee. And Judah continues on the fight, continues this guerrilla warfare all throughout the territory of Judea against the Seleucid army in various places. One of the major victories was the Battle of Beit Horon, which is mentioned within the chapter, which is a significant victory for the Maccabees during this time. And as they were pushing the Seleucid army away from the territory, what they were also doing is cleansing those towns, removing idolatry from the various towns that the Seleucid army was actually placing those pagan idols and pagan altars, and the Maccabean revolt also forced the children of Israel to return to the covenant of their fathers. And that's was the thing that was happening. And a statement by Judah Maccabee in chapter 3, verse 19, "For the victory of battle stands not in the multitude of a host, but strength comes from heaven." When you read throughout these chapters of Maccabees, you will see the strong faith that Judah Maccabee had in the Most High God. So even though God's name is not mentioned directly within the first Maccabees, and of course you don't have any quotes from Jehovah God himself within the book of first Maccabees, you see that he was praying a lot, they would fast, and he was putting his trust in Jehovah God, and not, even though their forces were small, in comparison to the Seleucid army that kept coming in to the territory, he trusted strictly in Jehovah God. And again, what they were doing was going from town to town to push out the Seleucid army from the various towns, and then they were cleansing those towns of the pagan idols that were placed there, and forcing the children of Israel to circumcise their children and to keep the Sabbath day and all of the other Torah traditions that were commanded by Jehovah God. That's what they were forcing people to do. And the reason why he was doing that is because he felt that as the children of Israel would return to Jehovah God would return to them and grant them the opportunity to be victorious in every battle that they would join in. And in chapter 4, this is where we read about the Hanukkah celebration itself, because as they were cleansing towns, as they were going along and pushing the Seleucid army away, after that major battle in Beit Horon, they said that they should just go to Jerusalem, because again, there was a garrison of the Seleucid army in Jerusalem. Of course, this abomination of desolation was still at the temple site. And as they were having victories in the various towns around Jerusalem in the territory of Judea, they felt that they had the opportune time, while they had some sort of peace as the Seleucid army was trying to regroup to go to Jerusalem, kill off the Seleucid army inside there, and rededicate the temple to Jehovah God. And that was also an attempt for them to draw Jehovah God closer unto them. So what they did was recapture Jerusalem and the temple, and this is circa 165 BCE. Again, these dates are very important. And what they did was cleanse the temple. They removed the pagan altars and idols, and they constructed a new altar, because when the abomination of desolation was set up by Antiochus IV at the temple, what he also did historically, what is said, that he sacrificed swine's flesh upon the altar of God. So in chapter 4, what we read there is that they did not want to, or they did not know how to purify the altar. So what they said is they're going to set aside that altar, and until the time where a prophet of Jehovah God would come and tell them exactly how to do it. But in the meantime, they set up a new altar, and that's how they would be able to reinstitute the daily burnt offerings at the temple site, as it was prescribed that the children of Israel were supposed, or the high priest and the priests out of the line of Aaron were supposed to be doing 2 times a day. So this event, it became the foundation of Hanukkah. In 1 Maccabees chapter 4, verse 57, it says, "Moreover, Judah and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 5 and 20th day of the month Kislev, with mirth and gladness." So Kislev is the 9th month on the Hebrew calendar. So on the 25th day of the 9th month, that's when they said they would institute, or that's when they instituted the celebration of Hanukkah for 8 days. There are traditions which we, time doesn't permit us to go into traditions or something that's not necessarily specified in history, or the miracle of why they chose 8 days. Chapter 4 in 1 Maccabees just said they did it for 8 days. But again, there are various traditions that speak about a miracle of oil that would have been for 1 day, that lit for 8 days. There are various traditions that or oral traditions in regards to that. But again, as we're speaking specifically about what's actually written, they just celebrated it for 8 days. They had time to cleanse the temple and to have these celebrations. Let's speak about a timeline now as we connect the book of Maccabees to the book of Daniel and the various chapters that we read about earlier. And 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verses 12 and 13 speaks about Antiochus and how he came into reign, the Seleucid kingdom, not just the army, the Seleucid kingdom, in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. When you read from the book, beginning of the book of Maccabees, it speaks about Alexander and how he reigned and how he took over a vast amount of territory in what we know as the Middle Eastern region, and to Egypt, and also pushed out into Asia as well. And that began the period of the kingdom of the Greeks, so to speak. And so Antiochus IV came in charge of the Seleucid kingdom, which was one of the offshoots of the Greek kingdom, in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks, as is written in 1 Maccabees, again, the 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verses 12 and 13. Then the 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verses 20 to 25, it speaks about Antiochus after he went into Egypt, which was the Ptolemaic kingdom. He won a battle there, and as he's coming back north, he has to pass through Judea. And this is in the 143rd year of the kingdom of the Greeks. He went up against Israel and Jerusalem with a great multitude. And when he had taken all away, he went into his own land, having made a great massacre and spoken very proudly. So on his way back to his land, and he's filling himself after the battle in Egypt, and he's traveling north through Judea, he basically plundered Jerusalem. Then after 2 years, this is the 2 years after the 143rd year, which is going to lead us, of course, in the 145th year. And this is written in 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verses 30 and 32. The king sent his chief collector of tribute unto the cities of Judah, who came into Jerusalem with a great multitude, and spoke peaceful words unto them. But all was deceitful. When they had given him credence, he fell suddenly upon the city and smote it very sore and destroyed much people of Israel. So we read in the book of Daniel about someone coming up and making a covenant with the people, but being deceitful. This is exactly where we get that information in the book of they see the fulfillment of it in the book of 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verses 30 and 32. And also within this 145th year, as we read in 1 Maccabees chapter 1, verses 53 and 54, that in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar and built idol altars throughout the cities of Judah on every side, and burnt incense at the doors of their houses and in the streets. And when they had rent in pieces the books of the law, which they found, they burnt them with fire. We spoke about that earlier when we were speaking specifically about the abomination of desolation. And this is where comes very important in the timeline. So in the 145th year of the kingdom of the Greeks, that's when the abomination of desolation was set up. And then we read now in the book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 57, and on the 5 and 20th day of the month, again, this 145th year, they did sacrifice upon the idol altar that they had set up, which was upon the altar of God. So they set up an idol altar to Zeus, which is the abomination of desolation, in the 145th year. It was set up on the 15th day of this 9th month on the Hebrew calendar. And on the 25th day, that's when they actually sacrificed upon that altar that they had set up over the altar of God. As the timeline continues, and he, which is Mattathiah, he died in the 146th year, and his son buried him in the sepulchres of his fathers at Modin, and all Israel made great lamentation for him. That's in 1 Maccabees chapter 2, verses 72 and 73. Again, this is in the 147th year. Again, this is counting as from the years of the Greeks. So and then 1 Maccabees chapter 3, verse 36. So the king, which is talking about Antiochus, took the half of the forces that remained and departed from Antiochus' royal city, the 147th year, and having passed the Euphrates, he went through the high countries. So what was happening in this chapter that we read, which we didn't discuss earlier, is because Judah Maccabee and his army, as he's galvanizing the children of Israel to wage battle against the Seleucid army, and then being victorious in battle, Antiochus IV still is in charge of other territories within his kingdom. So he's losing battles in Judea, but he still has to wage war as he's trying to Hellenize other territories within the Seleucid kingdom. So this is causing a problem for him. So he had to split up his forces. So this also, as it mentions, and it's very important that this year that takes place, the 147th year, where now he started to lose strength. So it goes on in the 1 Maccabees chapter 4, verses 25 and 27, that the next year, the year, of course, after the 147th year, which is the 148th year, it said the next year, therefore, following Lysias, gathering together 70,000 choice men of foot and 5,000 horsemen, that he might subdue them. So they came into Idumea and pitched their tents at Bethsura, and Judas met them with 10,000 men. So again, this is, as we're building this timeline, now we're in the 148th year. So now it goes on and it says, now on the 5 and 20th day of the 9th month, which is the month Kislev, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings which they had made. Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it. Even in that was it dedicated with songs and citherns and harps and cymbals. That's written in 1 Maccabees chapter 4, verses 51 and 52. And this is the celebration, or the institution of the celebration of Hanukkah, as the temple was rededicated on the 25th day of that 9th month. And this is in the 148th year. Again, previously you mentioned that it was desecrated in the same day, the 25th day of the month, on the 145th year. So this is again 3 years prior, because he counted 45th year. So you had the 45th year, the 46th year, the 47th year, and the 48th year. So actually 3 years later, exactly 3 years later, this is when the temple was purified and a new altar was set up, and they were able to reinstitute the daily burnt offerings again. And in regards to Antiochus IV himself, as it mentions in 1 Maccabees chapter 6, verse 18, that he died in the 149th year. And again, this is the year of the kingdom of the Greeks. So from the time that he went to Jerusalem, set up that, and had that initial massacre, made a covenant with the people that they started to Hellenize themselves up until the year of his death, we get a 7-year period, which coincides with the 7-year period that we read throughout the book of Daniel, or the 6 and change years, if it was going to be more precise, that we read in the book of Daniel. We have that book of Daniel chapter 9, which speaks about the 70 weeks. And that final week, where half of that week, he makes the covenant with the people. Then he set up the altar of desolation at the end of that half week. And then the children of Israel were able to rededicate the temple after that half week as well. And again, when we follow the timeline, we see that how everything coincides. So in conclusion, the book of First Maccabees, the chronicles, the courageous fight for freedom. We also read about the institution of Hanukkah, the celebration that occurs year by year in the Hebrew calendar on the 25th day of the 9th month. It's a time to reflect on the resilience, faith, and identity of the children of Israel. And also it's a history of hope and perseverance and the triumph of faith over oppression. So that brings us again to the conclusion of our discussion. We're going to turn it over we passed our hour at this